Ed eccoci ancora qua, signore e signori, bentornati qui al Division.
Here we are, the vision stage. We have so many meetings here, and the previous meeting was intense, beautiful. We spoke about people and their stories, and now we want to change gears and consider the world surrounding us. We know it. The global context is more and more complex and uncertain. Geopolitical, economic, technological dynamics are reshaping whole markets and supply chains. Understanding such changes is not just an exercise of analysis, but a specific responsibility, especially for those working on international markets, just like the eyewear sector. Today we have so many things to talk about. We have two outstanding representatives, Monica Maggioni, journalist, TV anchor woman. She has a deep knowledge of various areas. And good morning, Alec Ross, author and professor at Bologna Business School. Buongiorno. And consultant for the US government on innovation for years, has been considering the impact of technology on societies. We have so many things to talk about, and without further ado, I'd like to cut to the chase. Feel at home. We'll listen to you with great interest. Have good conference proceedings. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. I apologize from the very beginning for possible mistakes in Italian. As you can hear from this cowboy accent, US accent, Italian is not my mother tongue, but I'm sure that my friend Monica and I together can have a wonderful conversation for sure. Alec, and where can we start? Let's start to consider something everybody is curious about. It's a phase of big changes. The theme is change transient, and at a certain point everything will go back as it was before. I mean, before President Trump and the destabilization we are experiencing or not. Is it something stable? Is it something systemic? I start with my answer, and then I will give you the floor if you want, starting from here. What I'm witnessing, what we are telling, what we see at the moment is something so disruptive and one might think that one day we go back to before, but I don't think it's so. I think that what we are experiencing in this phase is such a sea change that, for example, the USA, to speak about the USA, and the global balance has been shaken so much, and I believe that we won't go back to the past, and perhaps some dynamics may change, but we won't go back to the past. And if I should think about the reason why we don't go back to as it was before, I need some reference points, which are the things affecting the scenario where we are. Some elements have always been with us. Territorial issues, geographical issues, and the world. You have territorial, geographical issues, but it's not new. And then economic issues, it's not something new. But what is changing, how the two things are intertwined. And we have come from the phase of globalization, then they tell us it's the phase of fragmentation, but economic and geographical issues are interconnected, but all of this might be a way to interpret the history of the 20th century if we didn't have a third element that was not present in the history of the 20th century. It was present, but not to this extent. Well, it's the presence of the financial and structural strength of technology. And I'd like to explain myself better. What's the disruptive factor whereby all dynamics we witness cannot be interpreted as they were interpreted in the 20th century. Today, inside finance, inside relationships between states, and inside the research on raw materials, and inside the desire for Greenland, under all of such elements, you have a basic theme. Who will determine the future? Who will be the real powers of the future? Politics, national politics, and the politics we experience each day, or instead those that today work on technology and innovation will have available the levers of the existence of people, the existence of financial markets, manufacturing schemes, and at the end of it all, politics. Well, that's a big question mark in a Saturday morning, so that your weekend is overwhelmed by nightmares. It's a question mark, and perhaps we can think about it together. Alex, what do you think? I will try to do my best to identify themes. I and Monica Maggioni do not agree upon. I believe it will be difficult. I will do my best, but I agree on whatever she said. And if I may add two other points, I was in the board of directors of an Italian company, the Sole 24 Ore, and you know it, that group, and I was reading a draft of the annual letter, and I noticed that they stated in such moments of crisis and geopolitical difficulty, and I asked, for the previous 5 letters, and in each one of the previous 5 letters, you could read that sentence, crisis, 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 crisis. What does it mean? And it means that we won't wake up in the morning and say, everything is okay, everything is back to normal. No, I wrote a book 5 years ago, and I said that a decade of volatility was expected. This volatility will stay with us, and not thanks to Trump. Trump is a sub-product of all of this. And if I may act as a professor for 5 minutes, I will tell you why. And we have to rewrite our social contract, our social pact, as a result of such big geopolitical economic changes mentioned by Monica Maggioni. I'd like to explain myself better. For 100 years in Europe, we had the basis of the economy, and the basis of the economy was in the agricultural world, agricultural-based economy. There was an agreement between the elite, between citizens, between enterprises. There was a balance, but then for a period of 40 years, at the beginning of the 19th century, just like Monica said, 1840, it was the period of the development of industrialization, and jobs went from the countryside to the city, from the factory to from the farmer to the factory. And there were technological and economic developments, but we didn't rewrite the social contract. And what happened during the 40s, 1840, there was the biggest revolution in the history of the world. No intellectual movements, just like Marxism. And the Communist Manifesto was written in 1848. And then what happened? After that period, industrialization worked because we rewrote the social contract. And education available for everybody, the concept of pension and the concept of weekend. In the past, you didn't have weekends, so there was a redefinition of the relationship between enterprises, citizens, and governments, and it's called Engels break. And today, we're in the midst of a new phase because you have such technological and economic changes described by Monica, but we didn't rewrite the social contract. We don't live in the economy or political world of the 20th century. Then we have one last aspect, one new geopolitical order after the Second World War, 1945 to 1990. All 196 sovereign countries entered into some sort of dualism. Communism, socialism, sponsored by the Soviet Union against capitalism, and democracy sponsored by Western Europeans, and the Americans are super simple. Then there was the concept of the triumph of the democratic capitalism model, but there was more complexity, the Chinese model and the Gulf emerging model. And today, instead of the institution, the rules and alliances that defined the period after the Second World War, now everybody thinks about their own backyard instead of a world governed by multilateral institutions. G8, G20, it's a G0 world. And all of this is to say that no, we won't wake up a morning and state everything has gone back to normal. And the new normal will emerge perhaps in 5-10 years. But today we're in the midst of a period characterized by volatility, and we all should learn not to be in a defensive position, but we should surf the waves of volatility. And I should ask a personal question to Alec. Were you invited in the Board of Peace? Did you pay 1 billion? No. I feel better here in Italy than in Washington, D.C. of Donald Trump. It's an example. I was 13 from that. That's an example. The distraction of multilateral institutions to something. That's why I asked you this question. It was to say, one of the things mentioned by Alex, we lived 80 years using models with their own limitations and lack of efficiency that were criticized, but such models guaranteed development and relative peace for 80 years. Yes, we should speak about the area of the world where we lived, and certainly there were areas of the world not characterized by peace. I'm at Mida. I want to be myopic for a minute. Allow me to be myopic for a minute and say for 80 years we lived in a relative organized peace because after the shock of the two world wars and after the difficult phase of the Cold War, building an institutional system where alliances had a bigger impact than bilateral logic. Alliances had a bigger effect than power logics. That was the basic proposition of the past. And instead, all of a sudden, what happens? We've gone back to a power-based logic, and by itself, it might be understandable because you may say the USA are the strongest and feel to be the strongest. We can speak about it because if we see detailed data, American armed forces and a comparison with China, there are some question marks, but they are fully entitled to exercise their power because they're the most powerful. And the problem of the exercise of power and force, and if you have friction, you have nothing in the middle. If you have friction, can cool down crises and tensions, and the world is more exposed to the possibility of continuous conflict, and we see it. Alec Ross before told us, however, you have a global disorder where we are, and Donald Trump is a sub-product of it, something that arrives as some sort of consequence. And I have something to say about it. Donald Trump seems something different to me. He seems the perfect political mask to go through a moment, and the phase we are witnessing is not fulfilled now with Trump. With Donald Trump, we have the phase of the destruction of whatever needs to be destroyed to go elsewhere. And obviously, the American voters, just like all the other voters, were not ready to destroy the traditional plan of politics. If somebody had organized a political campaign, electoral campaign in the USA saying we'll destroy all democratic institutions in the USA, they wouldn't have voted that person. And instead, Donald Trump launched a traditional campaign, and an extremely traditional campaign based on traditional value systems and based on the real needs, because we should be clear about it, with the real needs of the American society, and a clear dialogue with pieces of the American society that were left behind. And he won a super traditional electoral campaign. But behind Donald Trump, you didn't just have MAGAs, Make America Great Again representatives, a white traditional society left backwards, against migration. And with Alec, we said just in Italy, they think that what is happening in Minneapolis will create an electoral problem. It's not so, because the base of Donald Trump is still there for him, but all of them brought with itself something different. The big difference that you have between Trump presidency 1 and Trump presidency 2. Trump presidency 1 was what we are saying now.
A traditional presidency where a super eclectic, awkward person was at the head of, and this is an understatement, but the backbone of the state was the same, and the quality of international relations had not really changed. Let's face it, I have interviewed, and by the way, this is a commercial, I've interviewed Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General of the UN for 10 years, who said to me, look, Trump won. Okay, fair enough. It was immediately harsh with the NATO and said, well, you have to pay. But at the end of the day, if you see what happened under Trump 1, the NATO, at the end of the day, was strengthened. And the institutions, as they used to be at the end of the day, though criticized, they were strengthened. What is going on now is something different. And Trump has not changed. He's the same as he used to be. What changed is the system powers and interests that has built this presidency. And I say so in my book, The President. And in the very first pages, I immediately mention Alec. So, rest assured, we've gone through this several times, but behind Trump, there are at least three elements. The MAGAs, so a very traditional white society, very much tied to a Catholic value systems, and you name it. And this is at the heart of the system. And then on top of that, there is that American company connected to traditional finance that in any case believes that, okay, we can have a president that bolsters the economy. We'll see if it really does so. Okay, fair enough. But the key thing is what connects Trump to what I said before, technology. Who are the main financiers of Trump in the second campaign? Well, the tech giants. To name one, Peter Thiel, who up until 1.5 years ago, he did not mention anyone in Italy, and he's the key man. I know him. He's the key man, Peter. He founded Palantir, and Palantir is this tech company based upon surveillance and big data analysis that was founded immediately after 9/11, and the main financier is the CIA. And it does have to do with Minneapolis, but I'll be quick on that in the interest of time. So he had founded PayPal, and I think that, this is something we all know, but Peter Thiel invested a massive amount of money on Trump in general and on one individual. And I mean, this since he became senator of Ohio. I'm talking about J.D. Vance. So the key person at Trump 2 to keep on the radar is J.D. Vance, the vice president, because he's the aggregation of traditional systems of that America that wants, to win again, and of this tech world that says something simple. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the Dark Enlightenment, but I tell you, it's a world that believes that democracy failed, is no longer useful for anything, and the democratic systems are pointless, and the president must be a CEO. This is a world of entrepreneurs, so it's a familiar language for them, and the president must be a CEO who makes quick decisions based upon the usefulness on the spur of the moment, and is not hampered along the way, because this is the only way in which technology can evolve so fast as to give to those who have it a dominant role in the development of the planet. Okay, fair enough if you're a CEO. But if you're the head of the single most powerful nation in the world, maybe we do have a couple of issues out there. And I'd like to add to that one of the reasons for all of this is the following. I met each and every one of these brotastic boy billionaires, as I call them. They are, all the same. They've become way too rich when they were too young. And there is a difference between intelligence and wisdom. It's two different things, completely different things. And these boys, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Mark Andreessen, and, all of the names you may not know, since they were 25, 26. I mean, they've been rich since then. They were already rich, and they have a vision of themselves as Übermensch, Superman. They are not people like just me and you. They are peculiar, special. And this has been strengthened by decades of increasing wealth and power, and they are surrounded by people who are like-minded. And this has kind of, created a bubble that in turn has strengthened this ideology that Monica has described. And now they have so much money and so much power that they can do what Monica has described to you a moment ago. They can choose a person, pick that person, an author, who in 5 to 7 years can become a vice president. And this takes me back to J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance and myself, I had a book that came out in the same month as his book. And these have become famous books in the U.S. I come from West Virginia. He's from Ohio. So very similar backgrounds. And we've had some events together, big events. I used to speak about economic topics. He would talk about cultural topics. We were not friends, but for 45 minutes on the stage together, we'd been together. And in that period, he was very mainstream. He graduated from Yale, a smart person, but then he has been nurtured by the Silicon Valley community that is so powerful. They read his book and asked him, would you like to move to California? He did move to California. He earned some money, and then they asked him, would you like to come back to Ohio? If you do so, we will give you every single dollar you will need to become senator. And so this community has created J.D. Vance from nothing. He's become number 2 next to Trump. So this is the dynamics that we don't read every day in the newspapers. And in a way, we have to dig deeper down, like in archaeology, to understand what's behind this American politics. So unfortunately, more often than not, we are distracted by our daily life. So what happened in Minneapolis, what happened in Venezuela, what is happening in Iran, but behind all of that, there is a non-managed approach, like Monica said, not managed by Trump's brain, but rather by another community. And Trump is a transition man. When necessary, they bow to him. But, if you think back to the inauguration of Trump, there was, a line behind him when he declared, I want to build the East Wing, I want to rebuild the White House in a couple of days with $300 million from them. Because if you want something, they provide that something. And then what do they want? Well, we want no regulation for AI, for example. Trump one was very much against AI without borders, but now he said, okay, let's go for it. Partly because there is a member of this team that has his own desk in the West Wing with all of these responsibilities. So the technological aspect does matter as part of the economic context. and today more than ever also in the political arena. I have managed the relations between Silicon Valley and Obama for 6 years, and we used to have connections, but we did not accept instructions from them. The dynamics was so different, even though intertwined, but today things are very different. You know, one is in the service of the other. David Sachs, and his desk. And David Sachs is the university mate of Peter Thiel. They've been studying together this thing since 1995. It didn't happen overnight. May I ask one thing? Sure. I asked you about the $1 billion. Okay, you know the United States better than any other European. Are you European and Italian? Yes, you are. And when faced with this dynamics, what would you suggest the Europeans to do? I can answer, but I'm asking you, how would you suggest that the Europeans respond to these very complicated dynamics that is surfacing? Because you know it very well. Well, it's simple, Alec. There are two things. And people keep asking, why is it that they are so much against Europe? Why all of a sudden this balance has collapsed? Well, like Alex said, regulation. This group of people, these powerful people, have two problems: regulation and taxes. That's it, period. And Europe instead means rules and taxes. We know very much that this is the case. It's even overly so and effortful. But there's a piece of that, world of rules that makes it possible for our countries to live with democracy. So the best thing that they can do is to live like a European in the best possible way. And so don't give up when it comes to big topics and big rules, and get back all of those shares of market economy and innovation and intelligence that Europe knows very well how to take back. If you have a short walk, there's a world that is so dynamic, so capable of innovating, of seizing the moment, that is so strong. This is what Europeans ought to do by aggregating, getting together, rather than sitting and say, we have the problem of unanimity, so we cannot do that. No way. That's not the time to change the treaties. We don't have time to do that. We should do what we can do together. Is it only 5 countries? Okay, those 5 countries will do it. Can it be done by 7 countries? Okay, let's go for 7. When last week Trump threatened to hike the rates one more time, well, the simple mention of the idea of the bazooka changed the climate. So Europe can be heard. These gentlemen have not structured the future. They have one problem on top of the others, and we'll come to geopolitics. It looks like that there is a big chaos. This is the buzzword. People say, we don't understand anything, it's a chaos. No way. It's overly clear. There's nothing chaotic. Everything is happening for very precise reasons at all points in time, whether it be a war or a disruption. But this is done when there is energy, critical materials, rare earths, and the possibility to exchange something for tech improvement. That's it. Everything else was sorted out in 1 hour. USAID, the biggest humanitarian agency, was, very important when the US were the planetary father that takes care of the planet, but USAID was closed in a nighttime. All of the rest relies upon the idea of hegemony with one big enemy. Don't you get confused. The enemy is not Russia for the US. Russia is, a small quarrel and a potential big friend. And this is nothing different from the papers of the period, very well. I'm not asking you to talk about that. I will, because also the great democratic strategists said we will face a decade of tension with Russia, and then we will get together again against the Chinese. And Trump is doing that in a very short period of time because, again, the big enemy of technology, the big fight is with China. And so all you're seeing is not chaos, it's not confusion. What is confused is the way this is done. Communication and management on a day-by-day basis may be confused, but the underlying rationale is instead very precise. And look, energy, critical materials, rare earths, these are strategic tools for technological development. And this means deregulation and detaxation. If you put together these elements, you can understand all of the conflicts that are open right now. So I believe that also, leaving aside this narrative of chaos is fundamental for those who, like you, do business. It's important to have these guidance in mind. It's important to understand where to go, what the direction is. So back to you, Alec. I think that Europe still has a window of opportunity to play its role. It's not true that everything is lost, because we do have time. Not much, that's for sure. And that is why I do not believe in the revision of treaties and you name it, that would have the time frames of politics that are too long. This is a quick moment, and it's high time we did all that can be done. No, I couldn't have said it better, Monica. I very much agree with you, and I would add that in a way in Europe, if I may say, we are our worst enemies. We are our worst enemies in Europe. And we are capable of doing things. When I think, for example, of the inventions coming from this peninsula that we now call Italy over the last 500 years, we know that glasses were invented here, spectacles were invented here. And the first IC engine in the world, the barometer, the programmable calculator, epidemiology, the writing machine, the microscope, motorcycles, parachutes, nitroglycerines, prostheses, the radio, one after the other. So many innovations. And you cannot give me an example of another like-sized country with this ability to imagine and invent the future. But unfortunately, over the last 30 years, and now I'm not talking in my capacity as an American who's judging Italy, but I'm one of your family instead, we have not been great protagonists. Instead, Monica talked about the role of China in all of this. And when we talk about the development of economic and technological models over the last 30 years, it has been like a soccer match. There have been two teams in the field, an American and a Chinese one. And instead of, having their own team, the Europeans have decided to be the referee. They, raise alarms, but the referee never wins. There's no cup, no award for the referee. So I think that in this very moment, we have to put up a team of our own in the field with the definition and management of economic models and technological models, rather than always try and surf amongst the great giants. Because China's first. America in this period is America first. And with that, I'm not being pessimistic. Honestly, we should feel freed up.
We shouldn't think, or the Americans protect us, or the Americans will create such supply chains. No, we can become a protagonist in this world. I'm not pessimistic, but however,
la mia solita mania televisiva di controllare i tempi. Sto facendo un'altra cosa, ma
Are we sticking to the timetable? An applause to Monica Maggioni and Alec Ross.
Non basta, questo è proprio uno spunto che poi ognuno di noi può farne tesoro e riflettere.
And we should reflect, keep on reflecting. Do I have questions from the floor? Yes, the lady. I don't hear you. You would be curious to know? The microphone, please. Canadian Prime Minister. I will reply first. Mark Carney, at the World Economic Forum, whatever he said was right. But, there's a but, it's just words, okay? And now I will be tough. Very often I hear such big statements, oh, everything has changed, we'll have different plans, we'll see. Because 2 days after the World Economic Forum, he cancelled his agreement with China after Trump threatened him. And also Ursula von der Leyen and all the others give such lofty speeches. Let's end and let's walk the talk. And I'm waiting for February 11th. Why? And perhaps I'm a bit tough. Ursula von der Leyen announced an investment, $250 billion from various sources for the development of artificial intelligence in Europe. And I'm studying how much of this amount of money has been spent, less than 10%. And so, yes, it was rich language, and my students at the University of Bologna, I invite them to watch the video, but do they walk the talk? What do they do specifically? It's okay, Mark Carney, so what's the reality of things? I agree on what Alec said with a slight change. I believe that in difficult moments like this, also remembering the reasons why a model is different than another, autocracy is different than democracy. A way of staying together in full respect is different than the logic of power. Yes, it's words, but we have remembered what the foundations are upon which society can be built. And Alec is right 100%. It's such a serious moment and it's so final in things happening that we cannot allow ourselves to just stick to statements or remembering the principles guiding us. One of the things I'd like to say is that, as very often we wonder, for example, how can we understand whatever is happening? I always say something. Let's make a distinction between dust and substance. Let's try and understand what is occasional. Those that speak about crazy things said by Trump, and but also the release of Epstein files. Let me be tough and say that's dust. It's not with that Donald Trump will change his path, his politics, but instead let's consider structural elements, every institutional change that is being made, and fortunately our constitution, and very often we complain about the Constitution, but Article 11 that didn't allow us to get into the Board of Peace because our Constitution, and they came from the war, they were farsighted, and they realized that we couldn't get into an international institution if equality is not guaranteed, and those are moments, fundamental moments. Is it something institutional? Is it something that will mark permanently the development of democracy in Europe, in the States, or is it transient? Let's stop talk about crazy things by Trump. Let's consider what is changing in our world. It's a compass. And yes, you have replied to a question I wanted to ask. A key element that can help us guide in such a complex world, considering what is an irreversible change, a change in the structures and not a day-by-day change. That's a key to the interpretation of the moment we live. I see different hands. President, speaking about the USA, inside the USA, from the way you have described it, it's the game is over. It's something that started and nobody can stop it, irrespective of Trump. And if instead Trump were stopped and next president of the USA were a Democratic president, at which point of history are we? First of all, I think that you don't have somebody called Donald Trump that can keep the MAGA and Silicon Valley community together. And we are just at the conclusion of the first year of Trump's term that will last 3 years. I think that nothing will change in the next 3 years. 3 years is a long period of time, and from January 2029 onwards, well, many things will change. Also because I think that J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, you don't have somebody just like Donald Trump that can keep it all together. I believe that nobody can get 52% of the support of the Americans to do whatever he wants to do. The theme of Trump is clear and obvious to each and everyone. If they do not send him home for strange reasons, he will stay there for 4 years. But if in 4 years' time a Democratic president wins, what happens? Will that president act just like Trump, or will he unbundle things? Because the changes you have talked about cannot be hardly dismantled. What will happen? There will be another difficult moment, and will Democrats act just like Republicans? No. You should understand, and Monica knows this so well. The USA are now the disunited states. We are a totally divided country. I come from West Virginia. In the midst, it's the hardcore of Trump's world, and imagine that nothing changes, and that if somebody wins in 2028, this conflict inside the country will keep on. And I believe that there has been a friction. And tell me if I'm wrong, Monica. There's been a problem in disunited states. And it will be difficult to mend. And actually it will be easier to mend the relationships with Europe, between Europe and the USA than inside our country, the USA. I'd like to say something. When somebody speaks about civil war in the USA, it's not excessive. We won't see civil war in the streets, even if something is boiling under the surface. And over the past few years, the social fabric was exasperated by both parties, and they created an idea of it against the other. It's a country where it's dog eat dog world. What caught my attention in the USA, there were wild electoral campaigns, and when one became president, he became president of the Americans. There was a social contract. There was a social contract, and now it's no longer so. And it has changed so deeply that I often happen to speak with people that tell me if that state and that state want to go, it's okay. Everything brings us back to the civil war. In such a context, it's difficult to identify an alternative. In a normal context of normal political dynamics, my reply to your question would be, yes, it's true. We've talked about the titans and technology, but at the moment we live in a society made up of humans, dynamics that we can control, and somebody that can control human dynamics can interfere. All of this is true, but it should take into account what was mentioned. The rift. There's a deep rift in the USA, and now it's too late to speak about it, but it would be interesting to enter the details of it. And one of the reasons of this rift is horizontal digital communication, and the reasons of a group have become extreme, the reasons of another group have become extreme, and mutual needs are no longer a sphere of trade unions, intermediate bodies. In horizontal digital communication, just the extremes win, and the USA are a terrible example of the result of these new social dynamics. Well said. Well said. I will tell you just something to prove what Monica has just described. And I managed the politics of technologies for the first Obama campaign, and in December 2018 I received a request for lunch with John McCain, and over lunch he told me, Alec, you played a key role in my defeat, but from this moment onwards we have to work together, and I am the chairman of the Committee of Armed Forces. He told me, you have a role, now we have to work together. And I just want to stress two elements. You will never lie to me, he told me, and you have to give me your heads up about strategic themes, and have the possibility to speak with you. And impossible to imagine that conversation between two men. We waged a war against one against the other, but dignity. And Alec McCain told me, I wanted to become the president of the USA. Thanks to you, Barack, and others, it will never happen, but we have responsibilities toward all the country and all of the world. It's difficult to imagine. We no longer have that world. And however, in Europe, we must be protagonists instead of waiting for a leadership from other areas of the world. Thank you so much, Monica Maggioni. Thank you so much, Ale Cross, for helping us. Thank you so much with an in-depth analysis that given us food for thought to understand the complexity of the world around us better. Thank you so much again. Thank you. And come back here to the vision stage. Thank you so much. Goodbye.